So around every 4 years, we get to think about this kind of topic. It's that kind of season. I'm not talking about the Euros. I'm talking about the general election that comes up on the 4th of July. So in a few weeks' time, a lot of us will be going to the polling booths. It's all over our social media feeds. It's all over the news at the moment. And when we launched the Life Central podcast, we knew that this was a topic we would want to cover when the time came. We weren't expecting it this side of the summer. We were expecting it in the autumn, but here we are. And I just thought it'd be great, Leon, to sit down and have a conversation about how do we engage with politics, with the general election, when we're trying to follow Jesus, when we're trying to help people find and follow Jesus. How do we do this well? And I suppose the first question is, why should we engage with it? Why is it important for us as followers of Jesus to be thinking about politics and the election? Why should we get involved with it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And obviously it is this year, it's the 4th of July, which is also American Independence Day. And, you know, we're looking at what's happening across the pond with their election as well. And then our election, it does seem a little bit tumultuous, certainly in my lifetime. I mean, I've been voting now for a lot of years and it does seem a little bit of a crazy season. I think we should be engaged. For me, we should be. I think a lot of Christians maybe are going into almost two extremes where they're not engaging at all. Yeah. And basically thinking, I don't want to vote, I don't want to have a say, I don't want to do that. And then the other extreme where they're getting so wound up and so vociferous and so, volatile in the words that they're saying and so angst-ridden almost that's not healthy for them or anything. So I think in terms of why we should vote, I mean, I think we also, there's some myths to be busted here as well, I think. One of the myths is that all politics is wrong and all politicians are corrupt. I just don't believe that's true. I believe most people who go into politics go into it because they want to make a difference. I think the political system of our day is a little broken. But I think the politicians within that are human beings as well. And I think they go into politics, most of them, because they want to make a difference, really. I remember a few years ago, I got the privilege of going down to number 10 with our Member of Parliament here in our constituency and with a bunch of other community leaders. And we went around number 10. You know, I got to sit in the Prime Minister's seat where Winston Churchill sat and went into the House of Parliament and actually meeting some of the politicians and listening to their stories. I think most politicians do want to go in and make a difference. I just think that it's a very, very difficult world to be in. But I think for us as Christians, we do need to be involved. And for me, that means taking voting seriously. And I'll give you a few reasons. It publicly recognizes the authorities God has set into being. And basically God has, in the Bible, has set into authorities, namely family, marriage and family, government and the church. Those are the three main institutions, if you like, that God has set in. So I think voting is playing our democratic right in that. And I think we have democracy because people have paid for that. You know, I know that on social media recently with the celebration of D-Day, and there was this picture of you get to enjoy a day on the beach because of their day on the beach 80 years ago, which is very powerful, really. And I think democracy, and that's not true in every country in the world. As broken as we think our system might be, there's a lot of worse systems around the world. So I think it also shows that we care about our communities. You know, as a church, we say we want to be for our community. To me, when you don't vote, that's kind of almost saying, I'm not interested. You know, I don't think my voice makes a difference. And I think it does. In fact, I did a bit of research, not so much in UK, but in American politics, some presidents, in fact, in history, were voted in or weren't voted in on the basis of one vote. Wow. Like one vote did make a difference. So I think we need to we need to vote because we're trying to communicate that we care about our communities, we care about our nation. Democracy is a gift, not necessarily it is a right, but it's a gift that we've got that some countries don't have.
And recently, the mayor of the West Midlands came down really closely to a couple of thousand votes, which across however many millions of people there are in the West Midlands, it was so close. Yeah. It really does make a difference.
I think it does. It absolutely does. And I think sometimes, even if your party doesn't get into power, actually the vote that you make does make a difference in the voice that they have as well. So if you care about the policies that a particular party is putting out, just vote for them. For me, I always think, and I know this is this isn't biblical, but do you know what I mean? Tactical voting, I don't like really. I think vote for your conscience. Vote for who you think is the right person. Because you might think it doesn't make a difference, but it will. And it might not make a big difference this time, but it could in the future as well. So I think that's really important.
Just to jump in there, Leon, not a planned question, but like there's a lot of disillusionment around politics. Like a lot of people are just fed up with the discourse, with the, you know, the I'm better than you kind of thing. And like a lot of people are disengaging with it and just almost people are feeling like it's hard to vote for what they want because they don't feel like anyone really represents who they want. It's easier to pick what you don't want, which is where I think the tactical voting comes in. How do we find our way and navigate through that when we are just a little bit done with it?
Yeah, I get it. And I think because I spend quite a bit of time in America or with Americans now as well, you know, it's even worse there. But I think that polarization, that suspicion, that distrust of politicians is I think a general thing. It's a distrust of leaders as well. It's not just politicians. I think it's leaders as well. And there's lots of reasons for that. That the leadership is pretty bad at the moment, I think, when we look at it. But also I think we're in a different culture. Everyone's kind of self-directed now, self-led. So I think we just have a suspicion about leadership anyway. So whether it's football management, whether it's business leaders, church leaders, political leaders as well. I think when it comes to vote, I think one of the other myths that I want to say is that there is a myth around, and certainly in America, and I think we can feel it here, that there is a Christian party. That if you're a Christian, you should vote for whoever. And I think that's a myth. The reality is sometimes you're looking at political parties and you're choosing between, now I want to say the lesser of two evils. I don't mean they're evil, but you're not going to get your perfect scenario. And I think obviously in America it's much more polarized. It's almost like if you're kind of a conservative voter, I don't mean a Tory voter, but you know your morals are conservative, you're Christian, you're going to vote Republican, and if you're liberal, you're going to vote Democrat. And that's just completely rubbish, you know. But we've almost got that view creeping in over here. Really, how can you vote for them if you're a Christian? The reality is every party is going to have policies that some you like and some you won't like. And I think the difficult thing for us is we have to pray, I think, and then vote the best that we can. And I think the idea that like Jesus is standing with a clipboard, you know, outside the polling booth, that when you come out, he says, now, who did you vote for?
Conducting his own
exit
poll.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. The Jesus exit poll, you know, and you vote, how could you vote for them? What about this? What about that? That's just not there. You're not going to get the perfect Christian party. And the reality is Christians have different views on this as well. I've got some really good Christian friends who vote Conservative and some really good Christian friends who vote Labour and Green Party and Lib Dem and who knows what else, you know. So the reality is you're not going to get your perfect. You just have to pray and vote as best as you can. You know, that's what I would say.
So going into this election season then, Leon, what are some of the pitfalls that Christians end up in? Like what are some things that we should avoid and some things that we should try to do as people following Jesus in the middle of a Jenny leg, as I'm calling it.
Jenny leg, that's good, that is, Yeah, I think we need to take the time to pray. We need to take the time to investigate as well. You know, I have been to sometimes to where I've not known much about the candidates, and that's down on me really. But a general election is so important that actually it deserves that we take a little bit of time to read up, you know, on what are they standing for, you know. And I think for me, I also sometimes I hear and I see on social media, and not just about what's right for me and not right for me and my family, but I hope as Christians that we've got a bigger view than that. Do you know what I mean? And I think sometimes people, I'm going to vote for them because they've got this policy, you know, and maybe we're a certain age and there's a policy about pension and we think that's going to be great for me because I'm getting there. That's fine, but think a little bit bigger than that, not just what's right for you. And I think the other thing, we've got a responsibility as the generation that we're in now to vote not just for us but for our children, maybe our children's children. And so I want to encourage Christians to don't just vote for policies that are right for you. Think about what is the national interest and what's the interest of others as well. And I think that's really, really important.
There's some great stories around Brexit, which there's not many great stories around Brexit, but like of how grandparents said, this isn't going to affect me that much because I'm not going to be around it, but talk to their 15, 16-year-old grandsons and granddaughters. How do you want me to vote? And almost gave their vote by proxy to people who weren't old enough to vote. And I just thought, not necessarily that you should do that, but the mindset and the heart and the attitude behind that was brilliant. What are some things that like are almost the ugly side of the general election that Christians can get into?
Yeah, I think, it's so difficult. I mean, character's so important. And I think there are some real character questions over many of our political leaders. And again, in America and here and other parts of the world as well. And that's important because, and I would urge you to say, you might like the policy, but look at the character as well. Look at the track record. Not that they're perfect, because they're not. None of us are perfect. But if the character is suspect, the reality is the policy you like may well shift. Because that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of people saying, "Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that," but because the character isn't there, actually they get swayed then by public opinion, by the winds of what's happening. So actually, the policy you voted for may well not come into reality because the character wasn't there to sustain it. So I think character is really, really important. So I think you look for that. So don't just look for the policies, look for the character. Because if the character's there, then maybe there's a chance that policy will actually work out, or at least they'll give it a go.
Good. Social media wise, Leon, we talk a lot about pause before you post. That especially is apparent, isn't it, during a general election? It
really is. And I think we as Christians need to really be careful with that one. And again, just the kind of thing, I mean, I spoke recently in this series, Me and My Big Mouth, about where Paul writes, do not, don't grumble and complain and moan, because if you don't, then actually you're going to shine like stars in the sky. And that connection between the way we moan and the way we groan and complain or criticize on social media, that I think there's a watching world that's saying, actually, you're no better than anybody else. And I think we do need to be better than other people in that sense. Not because we're better, but because we know Jesus. And actually, first and foremost, I'm not a Tory or a Labour I'm a Christian. My allegiance is to Jesus as the King and his kingdom. And then who I am and who I vote for comes out of that. And over my time as an adult, I voted for, well, I'll be honest, I've voted for 3 or 4 different parties over my time. Do you know what I mean? And I think one of the other things that I think we need to think about is many of us vote based on who we were brought up to vote by in our area, our family, our culture, our area. There are certain areas we're always Labour voters, we're always Tory voters. And again, I want to challenge us not to be bound by that because politics does change, people do change, the world does change. And I think the reality is I voted the same as my dad. Right. When I was first voted, I the same as my dad for many years until I started to think for myself. And then there were times when I voted different to my dad as well and to my mom. I remember one time when my mom and my dad and me, when I was in the house and we all asked each other, and actually it looked like the 3 of us had voted differently, which was really interesting. But that's okay because it changes and you change as well. And I think it's being open to God and saying, Jesus, this vote matters because my community matter, and I want to vote as far as I can based on what I think is the best for my community and how I see it, how I see the Bible, how I see the kingdom, etc. Knowing that my vote won't be a perfect vote. This party is not going to be a perfect party. It's not going to be the perfect Christian party, and that's okay. And I just have to leave that to God. But I think some people then say, well, why bother voting? Won't God just put into power who he wants to be there? But then we could say, why bother praying? Do you know what I mean? We pray because we believe that does affect things as well. And we pray because we want to come in line with God and his kingdom. And I think it's a similar thing to voting. We vote because God has instituted government and he's given us democracy. And it does make a difference. Make a difference.
It really does. And I think, it's good to think about, well, how do I engage with a policy or a person that I just really disagree with, or I think there's 2 elements to this. There's how do I engage with a politician or a party leader that I think is ungodly or strongly disagree with, and how do I engage with somebody who's voting for them? And you see a bit of their social media, or it comes up in conversation. Like, I think it can be hard to not internalize, I'm so disappointed in that person. How do we engage with all of that, Leon?
That's a great question. It is really, really hard. I think we've got to somehow try and disconnect what they voted for or who they voted for and who they are as a human being, and I think the same with politicians. I think we can have all kinds of strong views about politicians. At the end of the day, biblically, they are all created in the image of God. They matter to somebody. And that person that we slag off is somebody's wife or husband or daughter or sister. Do you know what I mean? And they have feelings and they have emotions and they are a real person. And as much as we might dislike them or dislike what they stand for, they are a person made in the image of God. And I think that's really important. So I think we have to try and make sure that we don't almost kind of like say, oh, because you vote for that, you are therefore this, and therefore your party is this. And then if you vote for them, you are this. And I think that's really, really dangerous. And we just have to remember that actually we're first and foremost kingdom people. We're Jesus people, and we're called to love one another just as Jesus loved us, regardless of our vote. And I think we're going to vote differently, and that's okay, and because actually who we voted for is not as important as who we say we follow.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important for Christians. But I think also for us towards people who aren't Christians as well. I think that's really important. And our tone is important. And I would encourage people not to post on social media who they're going to vote for. I would encourage that. I see a lot of Christians doing that. I see Christians in this church doing that as well. And that's up to them. Do you know what I mean? I would encourage people not to do that so much because I just think that is polarizing. And that does set up that kind of thing between people, which I don't think is helpful, particularly.
And one of the most helpful pieces of advice I heard was actually from The Last Leg that's on Channel 4. And they talk about that which unites us is greater than that which divides us. And looking for the things that you like in this season, we're looking, are you red, blue, yellow, green, all this kind of stuff. Actually looking for where can we get around the table and engage. And, for me, I think some of the best politicians are the ones that are able to bring the opposing viewpoints together. And, I heard Tony Blair talk about it, about politics isn't, I've got my opinion and I'm going to find a way to get my viewpoint across and get my way. It's about bringing all these people and finding a way forward together. And I think that's a really, really good way to think about politics.
It is. And I think politics suffers from what we all suffer from at the moment, and has done maybe for years, is this idea that we have to win. Do you know what I mean? And one of the guys I follow a lot has written a great book, a church leader, called Not In It to Win It. And actually, we have that idea that, you could say Jesus didn't win it. In one sense, he lost, both with the crucifixion, but it was his loss that gave us our victory. And yet within politics, and I think within our culture at the moment, we want to win at all costs. And I think what I hear, which I'm really disappointed about a lot these days, is politicians saying how bad the other person is. Do you know what I mean? Rather than what they're for. And again, but we've been like that as the church. The church knows what we're against, but does it know what we're for? The community knows what the church is against, but does the community know what the church is for? And so I think we need to be people who are for thing. And I think you're absolutely right. People that can bring people together with their differences, that's what we should celebrate and applaud, I think. We shouldn't be those kind of people that just further division and further the polarization between this or this, and it's almost like, you kind of push in, when you're in a swimming pool and you kick off, to swim and, and you kick off the side, and it's almost like we've got to kick off that side in order to get to the other side. And I think that's really sad. It's really sad.
How do we pray for this general election?
It's a great question. I love a quote I've written down here. Martin Luther King, he said this, and I think this is so helpful. We as the church, as the people of God, we're not the master of the state or the servant of the state. We are the conscience of the state.
Wow.
And that's a really good quote, I think, to say, actually, we should pray that actually the conscience of, that there's a good conscience that comes through this election at the moment, that there will be people come into power that will have some character and will have some conscience. They might not be exactly who we want them to be, and they might not have all the policies we want, but I think we need to pray for that. I think we need to pray, like you've said, for some unity as well, because I think that's so important. That's a biblical concept, and it's a concept for a nation as well. A nation divided against itself, Jesus says, cannot stand. And so we need to pray for some unity as well, and for some peacemakers, the people that can bring people together. So I think we need to pray for that. In terms of this idea that there is a God person, do you know what I mean? That there is one, it's going to be Keir Starmer, or it's going to be Rishi Sunak, or it's going to be somebody at Davey or whoever, and that's God's person. I don't personally think that that's right in that sense, the same as I would say that in America as well. But I think we do need to pray that God would use this election to bring some unity, to bring some healing, to bring something good for the nation, really. And so, and pray that, that we play our part in that as well. And if the reality is as well, that win or lose, okay, so if your party wins or your party loses, we're called to do good. regardless of who's in number 10. Win or lose, we're called to treat all people with respect and dignity. Win or lose, our hope isn't in who's won or lost. Our hope is in Jesus. So whether it's blue, whether it's red, whether it's yellow, green, orange, whoever, then actually that's not our hope. Our hope is in Jesus.
Yeah, and that's a really good thing to have in mind for the 5th of July when we wake up, or some people will have stayed up through the night watching all the results come in. I might be one of them. Like it's that sense of, hey, whatever happens here, God's on the big throne. Yeah. They've just got like a tiny little chair in Downing Street, but actually there's no authority other than that which God establishes. And so it is leaning into that. Hey, God's on the throne. God is in charge.
Absolutely.
And it might feel like he's not. It might feel like there's chaos, but God's in charge.
Absolutely. And while you're all going through that chaos on the 5th of July, me and Alison will be on a beach in Sardinia because we're away for the general election. But we have registered for our electoral vote because we want to vote. Oh, our postal vote. That's right. Yeah. And we're going to have, but we won't be here, which will be interesting actually, looking at it from a little bit of a distance. But I think, we as Christians, for me, we should vote. I think we really should. I think now, again, that's your choice. It's a democracy. Okay, I'm not going to judge you, but I do think we should. I think we should vote prayerfully. I think we should vote with having done a little bit of thinking, a little bit of reading, a little bit of research on that. But I think we need to also hold it lightly in the sense that, like you said, our hope is not in who we vote for. Our hope is in Jesus and his kingdom.
And just one last thing, like the Bible's really clear about praying for your leaders.
Yes,
even
absolutely.
if you didn't vote for them.
That's right. Absolutely.
There's some great pieces of scripture where Paul talks about, praying for your leaders and serving under them. And he's in prison, being persecuted by the very leader he's talking about.
That's right.
And so whether, whoever it is on July the 5th, locally and nationally, commit to praying for them.
That's right.
Because they've got a tough job ahead.
That's right. Absolutely. And if you lead anything, and many people who are listening or watching this will lead something, you know how hard leadership is. Political leadership is maybe the hardest of all as well. I think especially in our world right now, especially with social media and all that, it's really hard. And I think you're right that when Paul said that, and other writers in the New Testament, Peter as well, who said about praying for those that are in authority over us, he's talking about Nero and he's talking about other Roman leaders. That wasn't a democracy, you know. So as bad as our leadership is right now politically across the world, it wasn't as bad as what the Bible was written in. And they're saying, hey, you submit to a higher leadership, so pray for those who are in leadership over you.
Brilliant. Leon, thank you so much for taking the time to help us understand this tricky, sticky subject.
It is.
We hope it's been helpful to you. If you've enjoyed it, if you found it helpful, we want to encourage you to like it on social, share it, send it to a friend who you have conversations with. And thank you once again for listening to the Life Central podcast.